Today we are looking at a story of the man who asked the governing body of the Jehovah's Witnesses a wrong question and paid a heavy price for it. It was a letter he had been waiting for. For years, Olof Jonsson had poured his heart, his reputation, and thousands of hours of research into a 77-page treatise. He sent it to the only people he believed could handle the truth, the governing body of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and waited. Nothing. I am Dr. K, a theologian and polemist. If you enjoy deep dives like this, subscribe and smash the notice bell so that you don't miss what is coming next. When the letter finally arrived, he expected a thank you. He expected a call to Brooklyn to help them correct a century-old mistake. Instead, the letter contained a chilling command. Do not spread this information. The society does not want individual Jehovah's Witnesses to get involved in this kind of research. In that moment, Jonsson realized that he had not uncovered the light. He had found a secret. And the organization that he loved was about to make him pay for asking the wrong question. But none of this makes sense unless you go back to where it all started. Before the excommunication, before the book, back to the Bible study that was supposed to be a routine conversation, but turned into a theological nuclear bomb, the perfect pioneer and the fatal question. In 1968, Olof Jonsson was a definition of a success story in the organization. He is a regular pioneer, an elder, and the Swedish branch trusts with the most difficult research. During a study, a non-witness asks him a question that every Jehovah's Witnesses had heard. Why do you say Jerusalem fell in 607 BC when every history book says 587 BC? If you are not a Jehovah's Witness, you may not know the significance of 607 BCE to the Watchtower Society. Well, most historians view it as just another year in antiquity. For the Watchtower, it's the foundational brick upon which the entire claim to divine authority rests. So you can imagine what it means if the date is wrong.
Jehovah's Witnesses are essentially unique in teaching that Jerusalem was destroyed by the Babylonians in 607 BCE. This date is a specific part of their theological chronology tied to their interpretation of prophetic timelines, especially linking Jeremiah's 70 years with their calculation for the beginning of Christ's heavenly rule in 1914. Jehovah's Witnesses teach that the city finally fell and was desolated in 607 BCE and remained uninhabited for exactly 70 years, a key foundation for their prophetic chronology. Secular historians, archaeologists, and biblical scholars, including non-religious sources and most Christian and Jewish chronologies, do not support 607 BCE. They date the destruction of Jerusalem and the First Temple to around 587 BCE or 586 BCE, based on Babylonian records, synchronisms with the reigns of kings like Nebuchadnezzar II, and astronomical evidence. This later date is widely accepted in academic biblical and ancient Near Eastern history and is used by virtually all scholars outside the Jehovah's Witness tradition. Outside Jehovah's Witnesses and a few individuals associated with or sympathetic to their theology, there is no significant religious denomination, academic school, or historical tradition that holds that Jerusalem fell in 607 BCE. Some individual writers or fringe interpreters might echo similar dates for various reasons, but there is no established sect, church, or major scholarly group that uses 607 BCE as the date. It is a belief tied explicitly to the Watchtower Society's doctrinal framework. In short, Jehovah's Witnesses are uniquely committed to the 607 BCE date as doctrine, The vast majority of historians and other religious traditions locate the fall of Jerusalem around 587-586 BCE, not 607 BCE.
Most pioneers will just turn to the Watchtower magazine and say, "Trust the slave." But Carl Jonsson was different. He was honest. He told the man, "I'll find a secular proof and show you are right." Carl Jonsson walked into the libraries of Europe expecting to find the missing years. What he didn't know is that he was about to find a mountain of evidence that would make 607 BC and 1914 dates impossible. The mountain of evidence. Carl Jonsson didn't just look at one book. He looked at every book. He wrote to the world's best Assyriologists. He studies the Addis-Copy tale. He analyzed over 10,000 Babylonian business tablets. He discovered that for 607 BC to be true, he had to invent kings that never existed and ignore the very stars in the sky. But here is the mystery. Carl Jonsson wasn't the first man to do this. Others had seen it too. So why was the governing body protecting this date? That the very date of Babylon had proved was a lie? The price of truth. By 1978, 10 years later, the brothers in Brooklyn were deeply concerned. Not about the facts, but about the man. District overseer said, "Carl, the society doesn't want you to do this. If the date is wrong, Jehovah will fix it in his own time." This is where the price began to accrue. For 4 years, Carl was silenced. He was watched. He was told to wait. But how do you wait when the foundation of your religion is built on a math error? Here is what the Jehovah's Witnesses claim about the 1914.
At the kingdom's birth in 1914, the Bible students were not exactly sure what was going to happen, but they knew it would be a pivotal year.
Our times are closing in 1914. The kingdom is nigh. Everything must be sold, brethren. Prepare for the harvest.
I cannot believe we gave it all away. Look at this bank book.
We have nothing left. Nothing. And they said 1914 was the absolute end.
When were God's people held captive by Babylon the Great? That spiritual captivity lasted from the 2nd century of our common era to 1919, when anointed Christians were gathered into the restored congregation. God's people were tested and refined during the years following the establishment of God's kingdom in the heavens in 1914. Then, in 1919, Jesus appointed the faithful and discreet slave over God's cleansed people to give them spiritual food at the proper time.
The verdict. June 9, 1982, the final trial. They didn't bring historians. They didn't bring archaeologists. They brought a charge. Apostasy. Do you accept 1914 as the end of the times of Gentiles? Carl couldn't lie. He couldn't pretend that thousands of tablets he had seen didn't exist. He chose the truth. And in that instant, he lost his whole world. His family circles, his friends of decades, his very identity shattered. Carl Olof Jonsson was gone. They thought they had buried his research with his reputation, but they were wrong. In 2011, nearly 30 years later, the Watchtower was forced to break the silence. They published a 2-part defense of 607 BC date. It was their final stand.
According to historians and archaeologists, 586 or 587 BCE is generally accepted as the year of Jerusalem's destruction. Why do Jehovah's Witnesses say that it was 607 BCE? According to Bible chronology, then, the 70 years was a literal period of time that ended in 537 BCE. Counting back 70 years, the start date of the period would be 607 BCE. But if the evidence from the inspired scriptures clearly points to 607 BCE for Jerusalem's destruction, why do many authorities hold to the date 587 BCE. They lean on two sources of information, the writings of classical historians and the canon of Ptolemy. Are these sources more reliable than the scriptures? Except from the Watchtower article entitled, When Was Ancient Jerusalem Destroyed? Part 1.
But as Carl Jonsson sat in his home in Sweden, reading those articles, his blood ran cold. He realized the society weren't defending the dead anymore. They were doing something worse, much worse, to his evidence. In episode 2, we'll tell you what unfolded, because the story is just beginning. If this video has shocked you or driven any benefit, like, subscribe, and smash the notice bell, because by doing so, you are helping us to continue bringing you more deep dives like this one. If you are interested in watching the lies that the Watchtower Society has told about the 1914 date, click on this link.